Hey guys, we're going to make a one-piece mold from a thrown form. And I'm going to start off with this cup that I got from Cedric Mitchell. I'm going to measure it with my lid master so that way I can actually get the same size cup when I'm finished. So, because we have to think about shrinkage. So first thing I need to do is just move that pin over to the 12.5% shrinkage side, not the basic 1-to-1 ratio. And there's two sides to this. There's the big side, which is pointed towards you guys, and then there's the smaller side that's over on my side. So I'm going to measure with the smaller side, and then we will figure out what our size needs to be in order to shrink down to this side. So I'm going to just measure the rim right now. And you can see that there's actually a significant size change in terms of that 12.5% shrinkage. So, and then I'm just going to measure my ball of clay because I need to make sure, like right now I have a ball of clay that looks about the same size as that glass, but I don't have a ball of clay that's bigger than that. So I'm going to get some more clay. You're better off having more clay than not having enough clay. I'll wedge this sort of together. So this is just going to be one solid form, and it's going to be that same shape. I'm just basically going to remake that shape on the wheel head without worrying about any sort of hollow thing or anything like that. We just need the outside form. All right, let's get this started. Then I'm gonna just fast forward this, guys, for you. Whoop. And we're back. So now that I have my edges looking pretty good and that sort of stuff, now I'm gonna measure. See if I'm anywhere close. Bigger than what I need, perfect. I'd much rather have it be bigger than what I need. And I'm going to take off this excess stuff because really what I want to be forming right now is I would like to form I'd like to form a little rim along the bottom that will become a well. So see there's this little step that's happening down at the base of the wheel head. That is going to be like this little extra well so that when I pour my slip in, it's going past that and has a place to sit above, higher than the actual mold form. Okay, and I'm going to check my sides, still a little bit big. Perfect. I'm going to go back and I'm going to spend a pretty significant amount of time cleaning up all of my walls. I start off with my wooden form, but I want to be using my smoother rubber ribs to actually finalize all of this, because every mark that you have is going to show up on every piece that you cast after this. So it is worth your time to make sure that you have that all looking beautiful and clean. I also want to be really careful to make sure that my walls are straight up and down, or at least beveled going out, because if they curve in at all, then I have created an undercut, and that undercut is not going to be fun. You won't be able to get your pot out. Okay, now I'm going to measure the height of my piece. And I'm going to just flip over how I'm measuring so that I'm actually measuring with the calipers from the inside, because it'll make it much easier for me to measure the outside of my form, because there's that curved piece that you just kind of can't get into. But I can just take these calipers and like literally just pinch the cup and then use that on the side. Voila, I need to go a little bit shorter, which again, so much better to have to take off some clay than trying to add it on. You just totally distort your form. And I mean, honestly, I was pretty close, and my clay estimate was on point today, guys. Okay, and I want to smooth out my bottom. Again, if you want to have everything that you have on your piece right now is going to be what's going to be on your final piece for everything moving forward. So if there's a little like nail dent or some like weird fingerprint or like a goober or something on there, that goober is going to show up on every piece that you have after this. So it is worth your while to make sure that you get nice clean edges. I'm actually going to go back on this and make sure that I have, I'm going to trim off a little bit of this corner just because I don't want a sharp edge on my pot. It's a personal preference. It has nothing to do with like whether or not it's good or bad. I just wanted to have it a little bit of an angle and a cut corner. So I spend a pretty significant amount of time just kind of smoothing everything out and making it pretty. It is a pain in the butt. You'll go back and forth, like you'll fix one side and then you make a little edge on the other side. And that's just part of doing this while it is wet, but it's so much better to cast this when your clay is wet. It'll come out of the form nice and easy. If you wait until it's leather hard or even bone dry, you're going to have a lot harder time getting this out of that mold. Okay, and I'm just going to go back and smooth all of that out so that it can be nice and pretty. All right, now we're ready for the next step, guys. All right, so I put my initials on the bottom because now I don't have to sign my pot every time and nobody can steal my mold form. Not that it really matters, but now it's mine. I'm using the metal shears, or I'm sorry, metal sheeting, and I want to get this about an inch away from all of the sides. I don't need a huge border around there that it's going to make my mold heavier, and it's also going to, like, depending on your wall thickness, you want to try to keep your wall thickness pretty even. I'm going to seal this from the inside in hopes that my stuff won't leak. It shouldn't leak, but through the magic of foresight, when recording this, I know that I'm going to have problems. But the better job you do, the more likely you are to not have a plaster disaster later. Okay, that looks pretty good. I do want to make sure that I take that little flange that's hanging out there. I'm going to tape that down because that is in the way. All right, now we're going to get some clay and we're going to put that around the outside edge. I want to try to make sure that I keep that nice rounded form so I don't distort it too much when I'm putting it on there. I want to make sure that I seal this, that it's really connected to the bat. I did this on a plastic bat, so everything's going to unstick pretty nicely, but you can do it on a wood bat and that is fine too. But if you leave it on there for too long, sometimes it can muck up your wooden bat. So if you have plastic, go with plastic. want to make sure that that's as sealed as possible around all the sides. And now we're going to switch over to our plaster. So I'm going to start off with roughly, I think it's about 6 cups of water, because I think that's a 2-cup pouring measuring cup. You're better off having a little too much versus a little too, like having too little. It's not a big deal either way. However, your life is just going to be easier if you have a little too much plaster made up. And I'm going to go with the mound method. So that means that I have not measured my plaster beforehand. I'm using how I put this into the form as a way to get it into the mold form. So with a plaster, using the mound method for measuring, the entire process is that you are allowing the plaster to go in and create layers of plaster as we go up. And once you have a mound, means that you have enough plaster in there that it's up on the top and it doesn't sink underneath. So right now it's still sinking underneath. So that's no good. You have roughly, I'm going to give you like 20 minutes to get this little process done. I wouldn't drag your feet about it. If you start off with warm water, you have a little bit less time because that increases the chemical reaction. And you can see my island is still going underneath, but it's slowed down significantly. So I shouldn't need to add too much more after this point. But what I'm looking for is to actually get a little bit of a dry lake bed thing going around the edge here. So I'm trying to hit it over on the sides. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that plaster coming up in the, like right on the edges there, that looks like it's just floating underneath. And you're starting to get that dry lake bed effect, and that's perfect. This is exactly what we want. This is how we're going to town. Okay, so now we're ready to add our plaster. I have allowed my plaster to set just a little bit, just while I was going to get my other little like piece, my form to actually cast into. And now I can start stirring this. If you have any sort of hand allergies, skin allergies, or things like that where you your skin is sensitive, especially if it's sensitive to drying out, then I would totally wear gloves for this. But otherwise, nothing really bad is going to happen. However, I do want to put in the warning and the caveat that this plaster is not meant for doing any sort of body casting. This plaster, as it heats up, this is pottery plaster number 1 USG, and it heats up in that process. And so if your hand's in there or whatever other body part is in there during that time frame, you can get chemical burns from that. It is not comfortable. Because it does get pretty toasty. The other thing is if you leave your hand in there, or like your arm or something like that, and you didn't get rid of any hair that was on your body beforehand, oh my gosh, that's gonna pull all of that off. So people have done some dumb things and had to go to the hospital for that sort of stuff. So let's not. There's different plasters. There's different types of things to use for casting body parts. All right, so we're gonna take this. Now all of this stuff that's right on the edge there, I need to take that off, because if those little crumbs, if I start to pour right now, I'm just going to get those little crumbs directly onto my form that I want to cast, and it'll stay there. So make sure that that's nice and clean. And then I'm going to pour slowly over the top so that I get a nice little covering beforehand. And then look over on the side. Oh no, I have a leak. But that is okay. Do not panic. I'm just going to grab a little bit of clay, and I'm going to cover over that edge. As long as it's a slow flow, then everything's going to be fine. Be careful though when you put that on, to not push too hard, because you can actually make it worse. I didn't put any clay on the inside of that mold, so there's nothing that's really holding it in place there. So I just want to gently make sure that that is not leaking any further. All right, I want this to be about an inch thick, which that's looking good. Okay, and then I can set this aside, and it's going to take about 45 minutes for it to cure. And through the magic of, you know, time and video editing, I am now able to come back, and this is all nice and hard. Now, I did not clean up my plaster disaster when it was happening, because it's going to be so much easier for me to clean that up now that it's hard. So if you do happen to have a little plaster spillover, do not worry, do not panic, and don't even try to clean that up right now. However, all of this clay, we are going to just throw that away. Do not try to recycle it. It's got plaster in it. It's got, like, I've smeared plaster in it. The clay that's on the inside, we can keep that. And there is my mold. It is looking beautiful. Look at that edge, that little well that we have on the side. That looks spectacular. I'm very excited about that. So that's the step that I was talking about before. Okay, now we can take off the metal. And if I'm good about this, I won't like totally muck up the metal, which means that I need to take the tape off first. Because then I can just reuse all of this stuff. And voila, that looks great. I'm so excited. There's our bottom, sides, everything's looking good. I'm not going to worry about the clay that's on the inside there. That'll just come out later. One more thing, I just want to clean up this top edge with my Surform. If I do that now, it's going to be so much easier than if I have to do it later. I don't want little chunks of this breaking off into my clay or anywhere else for that matter, so I want to clean all of this off. It'll just save me some time and make things neater in the future. It'll feel nicer, easier to clean. Just make it pretty. I'm going to do that along the bottom edge too, just so that little edge doesn't like break off on everything that it touches. Okay, that looks good. Looks good on the top. Feeling good about all of our things. Now all this plaster, I want to make sure that I clean that all up. It is not good for anything. You want, and when you're switching back and forth between plaster and clay, you want to make sure that you clear off everything that has to do with the clay. And put that aside. And then when you're done working with the plaster, clean off all of the plaster. So that all goes away too. And there we go. That looks great. We got a mold.